All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to hop on today. My name's Adam, and be just taking some time here to just run over a few different things. And like you saw in the email that you got that invited you to this, the goal here is just to spend a few minutes, not trying to make these real long. Just that because we know you guys are all busy and have stuff that you need to do, but at the same time, we also aren't going to make them, we're not going to close them off necessarily. So the kind of the format of these next 4 sessions or so, and just a reminder again, these will be happening every Thursday. So if you hadn't signed up for the other webinars that are coming up here, be sure to do that. But the kind of the structure of the format is we're going to go over a few different features, a few different sort of tips and tricks or areas of discussion to bring to your attention. For some of you, some of these things may be new, for some of you, some of them maybe aren't. But then with that, then as we after we spend some few minutes doing this, you'll also see that there is the Q&A feature in your webinar controls. Totally feel free to take advantage of that. And you can use that in multiple different ways. One is just to ask some questions about what it is the topics are that we are discussing. And then also feel free to throw one up a question there. If it's just like you have something that's just totally unrelated and you have a question about you or hoping maybe to get an answer on, feel free to throw that up there. And even if it's not something that we can fully answer in the Q&A section or the Q&A structure, if nothing else, it could also be a prompt for us to look at, to cover that topic in maybe one of the future webinars as well. So really what this is all about is just to help all of you users just in being more efficient and useful with the software. So however we can do that the best is really the goal of this. So again, thanks for taking the time to hop on, and without any further ado, I'll just jump into a couple of the topics for today. And where I wanted to start today was actually up in the tools menu. I'm going to come up to settings and hotkeys. And so this is something that we really encourage users to find the hotkeys that are helpful to them. Now, admittedly, it's not going to be all of these. That would be like way too much. But there can be many here, several, whatever it is that is you find yourself repeating that action over and over again throughout the course of your day. We encourage you, find what that hotkey is for that tool, perhaps for that function. You can customize these hotkeys as well, and then make it make a part of your workflow. So just to show you how that might work, for example, a common one that hopefully that you all are aware of is if you right click on an item, and if there's something that you've already drawn on the page that you want to add more to, you have the option here for draw more sections like this, or draw more segments like this, or more highlighters like this, or whatever. This function's available for all the different tools that are out there. But there is a shortcut key for that. By default, this is Control D on your keyboard. So I can select an item, such as this floor container here, and without having to open the menu, I can just hit Control D on my keyboard, and I would be over here ready to draw, going with this with that same type of material. So you can see I have the same 2x10s that are selected. I also have the floor decking, and it's also been added into my takeoff items. So, but the big deal there is leveraging that hotkey. Control D would be a big one that many of you would make use of. Another one, I'm going to jump over to the roof area, would be the framing orientation line. So often when you're drawing your roofs, they may end up coming in looking something like, this on the side because the first section that you drew is incorrect, or you're trying to draw things so that they are oriented properly in the 3D viewer, low to high. And so over here in the tools and the settings, and this is one that doesn't necessarily come by default, but you can see here in my down here, my set framing orientation line, I'm going to set this to F12. That's one that's available. So I'll set that as my hotkey for set framing orientation line. And now all I need to do is select that particular container, hit F12, and I'm already ready to draw that framing orientation line. So again, I can just draw it any way that I want, low to high, put it back in. So F12 you can set up, or set up your own customized key. But anyway, so this idea of using hotkeys can really speed up your process. And on a side note, I'm going to pull up this little picture here. Something that can also you can use in conjunction with those hotkeys would be like a gaming type mouse, such as this one, or there's a bunch of them out there. And also potentially a gaming keyboard that would allow you to put some of those commonly used hotkeys right at your fingertips, literally right at your fingertips. Again, just helping you keep with the flow of your work rather than having to be cumbered down with navigating through menus and so on. So encourage you to take advantage of some of those hotkeys that are available. One other one that's not exactly a hotkey, but something that you may also find useful is, let's say I'm drawing this roof area, and I've got a couple of sections here, and I wanted to draw more of those. So I'm going to come down here and draw more sections like this, or using what I just said, if I hit Control D on my keyboard, I'm starting to go draw. And so now I'm going to go around the building and start to draw them in place, right? And now I get to the end of this first section, and there's more I want to draw. I've got this one here, and I've got a couple more down here. And but I'm stuck at this container. So how can I get out of this container and instead move on to the next? If you are in drawing mode like this and you're drawing a container, the same would also be true for linear lines as well. I can hit the N as in new, or N as in Nancy key on my keyboard. So not Control, just N as in Nancy. And that will, notice it will break me free from that container, but I'm still in drawing mode. So now I can go and start another container. So I can trace around this one and then hit N as in Nancy, new, come over to the next one and trace it around. So that functionality could be very useful rather than having to stop your operation and go back and do another draw more like this or whatever. Again, similar with the linear tool, if I'm drawing along and I'm tracing all my lines and I want to jump over to a different part of the page, same thing, and as a new or a Nancy, go and jump off to another spot. So take advantage of, that's just another kind of hotkey type of thing that's available, and you can leverage as it makes sense in your project. Another area that I wanted to touch on today would be the area of presets in a couple of different fashions. And if you're used to presets, I wanted to show you there may be one other facet of them that you may not be aware of that I'll point out. But presets is the concept that if I've drawn something such as this roof container here, and I've got my roof container set to an 812 pitch, I have 2x8 SYP number 2, I've got my roof decking set as the area is already added. I've got my preferred product. So I've got a lot of stuff that's kind of customized about this container, and yet it's still maybe my typical thing. If this is something I use on a regular basis, then it would be really handy if I had this already set up for me as a preset. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom and choose Save as Preset. And I'll call this my 2x8 rafters with decking. Click OK. And now that saves it for me. Now, to access a preset, you come up to the tool that you would be using normally, like the roof tool here. And instead of left clicking on it to start it like you normally would, I can right click on it and choose the option for, there's my preset, my 2x8 rafters with decking. And when I go to draw this new container, what I'm going to find is all of those settings now have been set up for me. It has my pitch, my product, my application, my area added, my area application, my roof decking. It's all there just the way that I had set it up. And this would be true for containers, would be true for linear lines, true for highlighters, true for anything that you draw on a regular basis. So the idea would be to take those presets, put them into your template file, so that as you work on jobs, you have those things available to you. Now, one thing that some of you who are used to presets, one other thing that you maybe aren't as familiar with is you also have the ability to set a preset as the default behavior for a tool. So what I mean by that, in Highlighter may be a great place to do this, although it's certainly, again, not limited to just that. But let's say that I want to draw a highlighter here to highlight some particular portion of the page. And then I set this to be red. And so I want to save it. I want to have a preset for for red is my highlighter. So now when I come up to my highlighter, I can click on it. Instead of yellow, I can choose red as what I want to draw. But let's say that I just always want my default behavior to be red. I want whatever I've set for this preset to, instead of having to right click and pick it, I just want it to be when I left click on it. See, if I left click here, I'm going to get yellow, but I want it to be that I get red. If I come over here to the profile tab, come to presets, and this is where you can manage your presets. I'm going to come to my highlighter, and there's red, and I have the option here to set default. So I'm choosing to set this red as my default behavior for the highlighter tool. So now if I come to the plan tab, and I choose, and I'm going to left click, I'm not going to pick the preset, I'm just going to left click to start my highlighter. And when I do and draw it, I get that red behavior. Again, that concept's true not just for highlighters, that can be applied to any of these tools. So if you wanted your default behavior for your segment tool to just be an LVL beam, because that's almost what you're drawing nearly all the time, then you could create a preset for an LVL beam and then come to the profile tab, come to presets, come to your segment tool, and you could choose to set one of those as your default behavior. So just another way that you can leverage presets. So then finally, kind of on the top for today, kind of related to the idea of presets, but expanding that, we encourage you to, as you think about different sort of the corner cases or peripheral things that you need to call in your project, think of different ways that you might leverage presets in order to help you get to those things quicker. Sort of think outside the box a little bit. And I had 3 examples that I just kind of wanted to bring in front of you, things that maybe you encounter, but they're more representative of the idea of think about how you might leverage the different tools in the software to be able to get to the things that you want and to make it easy for you to get there. So one example of that might be X bracing, like on your flooring. So if you had some mid-span bracing that you needed to call, like for like some 1x4 that was that mid-span X bracing between like on a dimensional floor, here would be one way to do it. I can come here to my segment tool, and I'm going to draw a line all the way across. Okay, and so now I've got that lineal footage. So the trouble though there is that, well, first of all, I can set its application. I'm going to come down to application. And I'm coming off the screen here for you, but I'll just pick my bridging application, and I'll go to product and more products, and I'm going to pick this as 1x4 since that's what I usually use, and I'll just use SYP utility. Okay, so I've got that in there. Now, the problem is that since that bracing doesn't just run flat, it runs, from the bottom of one joist to the top of the other joist, it's going to be at a pitch. So in order to handle that, I'm going to come here to my pitch and set it to actually be a 10-12 pitch to account for that extra length of material I'm going to need for that. And then also, since I'm going to have two runs of that, it's basically one diagonal one direction, one diagonal the other direction, I'm going to set its plies to be 2. So now what I've done is I've set up a bridging application where I can easily draw this length, and I'm getting enough material to account for the X bracing for both pieces. So then I could do a draw more like this and go that way. Or again, as we discussed before, I could save this as a preset, have this in my tools to pick from. So then as I'm just drawing my floors and as I'm doing my projects, whenever I come upon a situation where I need it, all I have to do is come up here, pick my bridging preset, and trace all the way across, and I've picked up all that lineal footage. Everything's labeled the way that I need it to be, and it's all ready to go in my material list. So there's one thing. Another one would be collar ties, is another one that we run into occasionally with customers. Let's see, I'm going to come over to my roof page here, and I can see I already got some drawn on here. But let's say that I wanted to get a collar tie all the way across here at a certain on-center spacing. You could use the floor tool, and that would be one way to do it. But an even faster method that may work for most of you in most cases is to use the linear tool. I'm going to use the linear tool and just draw the length of the building here. And let's say then that I want to right-click on it, and I want to set my count spacing to be 32 inches on center. And then I'm going to change that count use to be an LF, so I get a length out of it. And then I'll change that application to be the collar tie. And I could even, if I want, this is just kind of getting finicky, but if I want to rotate that so that they are oriented this direction on the page. And then my product, I'm going to go ahead and pick some 2x6 or 2x8 SYP is what I'll call it in this case. And then I'm going to set the length. Let's say that my most common length for my collar ties is like a 10-foot. So now what I have is I have this line and it's arrayed across the building, and I'm picking up a 10-foot collar tie every 32 inches. I could even also come over here to my linear line that's actually holding that count spacing, and I could rename the product or the application as collar tie line, just so I know what it is in my takeoff items list, and I'm not surprised by the fact that it's not linked into my list. You could even set that to be a ridge beam if you wanted to, take it off that way. But in any case, so what I've done is I can right click on this. I can save as preset, and I can call this collar ties. Again, something that you could put into your template file so that as you work on future projects, as you're drawing along, it's like, oh, I need some collar ties right in there. You right click here, choose collar ties, and then you're just drawing a single line all the way across the building, and you've picked up all those 32 inches on the center collar ties. And of course, you could adjust the spacing as needed from project to project by just right clicking and making that change. So again, kind of a different approach. Maybe some of you already used that, but maybe some of you hadn't really thought of that angle. But again, just encourage you to think a little bit outside the box of how can you leverage these tools to get to what you want. One final one, and again, just even as I go to this final one, I'll just remind you of the Q&A section or the Q&A portion of the webinar software there. And if you want to put in a question, feel free to do that. But one other one to kind of think outside the box or a way to approach it would be windows, and specifically window trim. I'm going to go to this view. So let's say that we wanted to call the window trim. Now, of course, if you were doing the siding as well, then you could use the subtract box sections and so on. But we know that there's going to be some cases with maybe some siding types of material that you really won't be drawing the siding so much, or you're going to handle the siding different ways. And sometimes there's the need to be able to just call the trim independently. And so here's a different approach to be able to call that easily without having to draw every single little stick in. I'm going to draw an area tool, and I'm going to trace. Actually, I'm going to trace around the outside of this window. Okay, so now I've got my area here, and what I'm going to right click on that area now, and I'm going to choose to add the edge to it. And I'm going to set the edge application to be window and door trim, and maybe pick my product. Maybe I want some clear trim on there. Let's see here. I'll go with a 5 1/4 by 6. So I've got that drawn in place there. Then I can come to here and actually remove the area, strangely enough. And so now I've got this box, right, that has my window trim in it. And I could go to draw more like this. However, I'm gonna create my preset here. I'm gonna call it window trim. And then I'll go ahead and delete this here. So now I have a preset that's available for me to go and draw in that window trim. But then one other tool, again, maybe it's sort of a hotkey, sort of not, but it's kind of a modifier that, again, some of you may not be as familiar with. And that is for any of these container tools, if you want to have them draw in not just a point where like I'm clicking point to point to point to point to point to point. That's the standard way. But if you want to be able to draw in a box format, then what you can do is you can actually come up to any of these tools, and when you go to activate it, so I'm going to right click and find my preset here. But before I click, I'm going to hold down the shift key on my keyboard. And when I click, keep holding it down while I click to start that tool. So I'm going to start window trim, and you can see here in my little tooltip, it says I'm in rectangle mode. So now instead of clicking point to point to point, I'm just going to click the other side so I get those rectangles. So now what I have effectively is I have a really fast tool to be able to just go around, click and pull in all the sizes or the shapes of those windows, collect all those pieces of window trim, just easily and collect them all. So again, just another way to leverage existing tools, modify them, pull certain parts of them in and out, and leverage them to get to the material that you want to make that drawing process, to make that data collection process as easy as possible for you. So that was kind of the quick run through for today, touching on hotkeys, touching on presets. Next time we'll be jumping into other topics. We'll leave the Q&A session portion of the software webinar open here for a couple more minutes. So even if all you want to do is just sort of like leave us a note in the Q&A area of like an area or a topic that you'd hope for us to cover in the future, be sure to type that in there as well. So you can submit those questions, and then we'll go ahead and also be looking for. Oh, there's a question here in the Q&A. I'll just kind of answer that. There was a of how is it that we actually selected to draw in rectangle mode? Yeah, great question. So up here on when I'm going to any of these container tools, when you activate the tool, you need to hold down the shift key in order to get into that mode. So that would be true in 2 or 3 different spots. So one, if I just come to the tool and I'm just going to click on the default behavior, like even a floor tool, if I hold down shift and then click the tool, I'll be in rectangle mode. You will note that if I draw from left to right with it, the joists go, the joists that I draw, if I'm using a joist container, appear horizontally on the page. On the other hand, if I go from right to left, then they'll appear that way. So if you want to get into some of the nuances, that's what's true there. So that would be the first way you can use the shift key. But next, if you're using a preset, it would be the same thing. While you right click on the tool and find your preset option, again, hold down shift when you go to actually select that tool. And again, you'll be in rectangle mode. Finally, this actually also does work in draw more like this mode as well. So like right here, if I was to select one of these window areas that I've drawn and I wanted to draw more of it, but I wanted to be in rectangle mode, if I right click on it and come down here to where it says draw more sections like this, if I hold shift while I am selecting that option, that will also put me into rectangle mode. So great question. Hopefully that gives you the rest of your answer there. And then maybe a little bit expanded further, but. And I think there was a question earlier that I saw that float on by of whether or not these will be recorded, and yes, they will be. If you're interested in seeing a recording, or somebody else on your team that would benefit from any of these recordings or different webinars, shoot us a message and we can see about getting that to you. If there's any other Q&A that you want to throw in there, feel free to do that. But again, thanks for taking the time to hop on today, and be sure to sign up for the one that's scheduled for next week. Totally different set of topics, different things we'll be reviewing. So look forward to hearing from you. Talk to you more later. Thanks, guys.